What we're talking about today is productivity hacks and time management tools. And there's tons of them out there. What we're really going to help you understand is which type of tools do you need at which point so that you can scale your business with more ease. More importantly, what we're going to be working on is setting a better expectation and a better relationship with our business so that the ease part really comes in. And it was one of the hardest things for me to learn. I've been an entrepreneur since 2002. I'm older than I look. I just turned 60. I now have a portfolio of businesses, and this idea of having a relationship with the concept of ease. So my business and I have developed a relationship with the concept of it being easy. That was the hardest thing for me to learn. Of everything that I've learned about entrepreneurship since 2002, that is the hardest. But it's also been the thing that has made it a lot more fun. And if you don't know, I know several of you are members and several of you are guests, but we do lots of these community events. Usually there's at least 3 a month. They're on different topics. We have what's called the 10K challenge. And in the 10K challenge, we show you if your business is under 10K, we show you how to get it and keep it above 10K. That is a very important mark because you really cannot become financially free unless you get it above 10K. So the 10K challenge, it's free. We give you lots of free support. And then we give you a specific set of challenges to do after you've kicked things off. We also have focus and habits. Needless to say, that one always follows usually the month after we work on today's topic, which is really on productivity and developing a relationship with the concept of easy. That's what we're working on today. We'll have another event on June 11th where we'll really help you. It's a really powerful methodology that I've developed which I've used with entrepreneurs that are multi-million all the way down to people that are just starting, to really calibrate the way that you focus to have it line up with this concept of ease. So you're welcome to attend any of our events. On these events, there's usually anywhere from 10 to 40 people there, depending on the topic. Some of them are members, some of them are guests. We just make this content available because we want you to be more successful. If you don't know what ShiftCo is, we train conscious entrepreneurs how to grow their business and maximize their impact. As of April 30th, 86.3% have doubled their revenue. I'm very proud of that. And what we have found is that when you double a business, you triple its impact. So that's who we are. My background, just briefly, I've had multiple large exits, including an IPO. Again, I'm older than I look. In 2009, I had this brilliant idea. I sold my last business, started over with this crazy idea. There has to be a way to do good and make money. And I started, basically, it's a purposeful Shark Tank is the way to think about it, called Share on Purpose. In Share on Purpose, we have a speculator fund that invests in conscious businesses. An example of one of our investments is Your Izzy. It's the first zero waste makeup line. It's amazing. I love it. That's an example of something that we've invested in. And then we also have what we call the cultivator. And in the cultivator, we create our own companies. ShiftCo is one of those companies. And then over time, I train a team of people to run them. In the case of ShiftCo, it's probably 60% of my time because I love it so much. I absolutely love what I do every single day because all I do is help people grow their businesses and use these hard lessons that I've learned in 25 years of entrepreneurship. I use them to help other people be more successful. And so that brings us to today's topic. And it really is about developing a relationship with the concept of easy. And what we're struggling with is balancing time and life and the business. So what I want to ask first question is, where are you focused right now, and why? Are you focused on doing the work? So get the work, do the work, get the work, do the work. Or are you focused on growing your business and increasing the profitability? There's a reason why I'm asking this question, but I'd love for you to either shout out some answers or put them in the chat of where your focus is right now. Is it on the work, or is it on the growth of your business and the profit of the business? So Lisa, as things come in the chat, if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing what's in there, that would be great.
Sure. One comment, growing the business. The other one is a little bit of everything, which might be the problem. Another one is about half and half. Another one's doing the work. Somebody else currently the growth and profit. Another one, growth and profit. And the last one I see coming through here is focusing on personal growth.
Okay, perfect. So a good variety. And so if you're here, then there's something about the balance of these things. And by the way, there needs to be a balance between doing the work and focusing on growth and profit. And that's going to make more sense in a minute. But there's something about this balancing that seems hard. Does anybody have an opinion on why it seems hard? And you can either put it in the chat or take yourself off mute and share with us. Anything coming in, Lisa?
Yes, as you grow, you have more work to do. Somebody else says our brains can't multitask and focus on many things at once. Those are the two.
And both of those are 100% where we're headed. There's this really cool place called the Brain Health Institute that's not too far from here. And I've been fortunate to be involved with them through a nonprofit that I've worked with on brain health. And I will never forget the day that they walked through the research study. This was about 7 years ago, that you can't multitask. And I prided myself on somebody that multitasked, and they had proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that your brain is not capable of multitasking. So that's part of the problem. The other problem is what you're looking at on the screen. Is the challenge that we have is we have to focus on doing the work. And depending on your business, that could be anything. It could be building a website for yourself, building some marketing materials, or it could be serving clients. We have to focus on that and also growing the business and increasing its profit. And that's the tricky part. I'm going to give you a methodology to think through that. One other thing I'd like to ask before I go into the tools that I'm going to share with you today is, what have you already tried? And, did it work, and why or why not? Just so I can put some of the tools that I've developed into context. So again, take yourself off of mute or put that in the chat. Like, have you done time blocking? Have you used apps? Feel free to share any of those with the group that you've tried, and if it worked or if it didn't, and if you know why.
One of the things I do is every morning I'll write down a couple of the tasks that are floating around in the brain and then do a quick prioritization of what's the number one thing and then just do it. And then once that's done, come back and look at the task list again and again, a quick prioritization. So that way I don't feel overwhelmed by the sometimes many, many things I have to do that day.
Joe, that's one of the best tips, is to really get good at prioritization. Write down the things you think need to be done, determine which one is the most important, and move that forward, and then evaluate everything else. Anybody else?
Yeah. Another person says she hired folks to help with helping to get stuff off her plate, but seems that she has more to do and need more hands, but can't pay the extra hands at the moment. Another person is very dynamic and use a bunch of different tools and processes. That's the two to compare.
Anything else that you guys want to share that's worked or not worked?
I think what's helping me is consistency. So because mine is about sales, so I think with any business, consistency is key. Even if it doesn't bring growth on the day, you're working on it every single day, even if it's a little bit, and setting yourself goals. So I have a goal that I set each day to try and achieve.
So kind of give me an example of what that might look like. Joe, you gave a great example, and I'd like to take the suggestion that you just gave and give us an example.
Yeah, sure. So I at the moment I'm just trying to get through my phone book to try and reach to my family and friends and acquaintances first with trying to sell them services of a utilities company. We sell energy, broadband, mobile SIMs, and home insurance. And every day it's about contacting at least two people and speaking to a couple of people as well. That's what I try and set myself every day. And also trying to work on my sales pitch, what that looks like. If I have got no's, not letting that stop me reading at least something every day, just consistent work.
Excellent, excellent. Perfect. Lisa, anything else that you want to share before we introduce these tools? Because I'm going to be able to build off some of the things that you guys just said when I introduce these tools.
No, no more in the chat.
Okay, so the biggest insight that I want you to walk away from is it is not you. There's nothing wrong with you. The number one thing that all entrepreneurs struggle with is this ability to be productive, to set priorities, to focus. It's the number one thing. Entrepreneurship, I believe, is one of the most challenging things that you will ever do, second only to having children. And I can't even raise my dog, so I've never had kids. But I'm like, wow, that's hard. My employees, I watch them, I'm like, that's hard. But this is really, really hard. And what I've learned that I want to help you with is we want to shift the parts that are hard and look for a way to make them easy. And that's really how I crack this nut on what I call business simple. So whenever something is hard for me, what I do is I take a step back, and like a rock climber, that's a hard thing to do. If you've ever done rock climbing, it's hard. And what I learned about rock climbing is when something feels hard, so if I'm looking at that rock and it feels hard, if I'm approaching it from a place of hard, it's going to be hard, and every step is going to be hard. But if you take a step back and you simply look for the first most simple step. And Joe, that's why I like the example that you gave. Is what you gave is the most simple thing that everyone can do. Make a list in the morning of everything you think you should do, figure out which one of those is truly the biggest priority, and focus on that one thing. So this idea to develop a relationship with the business being easy and simplifying it starts with looking for the first most simple step. And that is something that I feel like I've mastered in the ability to consistently scale businesses above $1 million, is that I'm really, really good at finding the most simple first step. And so building a business is always going to feel hard. But what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how to simplify it. And part of how to simplify it is a different relationship with the business itself and really thinking in terms of making it easy. So let's dig into how we do that. If we take the complicated nature of building a business, let's say from 0 to 10K a month, from 10 to 30K a month, from 30K a month to $1 million, you are always going to have to focus on two things. And I've coined this construct, and I call it the fulcrum. We jokingly refer to it as the F word in Shifco. And the fulcrum is the pressure point between the two diametrically opposed forces in your business, demand and supply. So every single business, I don't care what business it is, can be broken down into the simplest element of supply and demand. Demand, quite honestly, is the business revenue each month. Supply is how you service that revenue, either through product inventory or service capacity. The fulcrum, if you think of a seesaw, the fulcrum is that piece of metal that balances the two sides of a seesaw. And the fulcrum is the strongest part of any seesaw. It's typically made out of the most intense steel. When it is made out of plastic for kind of small kid seesaws, it is usually a certain type of concentrate because it is handling pressure that is opposing. So when I took a step back in my first entrepreneurial venture, and I was like, God, this is so hard. And this was like, my business was barely making any money. This was like 2002, 2003. And I was really frustrated, and everything felt hard. And I'm like, it's hard to get the clients. It's hard to service the clients. It's hard to get my website figured out. Everything felt hard. I did this kind of rock climber analogy, and I just stepped back and said, okay, Terry, what is the simplest way to look at a business? It's really supply and demand. And lo and behold, that unleashed this different way of thinking about businesses. And I started studying this fulcrum idea. So the second kind of, let me just see if there's any questions about that construct, because we're going to build from this construct from here. Any questions or comments about, at the end of the day, we all are struggling with balancing supply and demand. Any questions or comments about that? Okay, second insight is there's actually 3 fulcrums. So if supply and demand is something we're always going to be wrestling with, every business of any size wrestles with balancing supply and demand. So the fulcrum really shows up, the intense pressure point and the intense need for balance is what a fulcrum is. It's a pressure point and it's a need to balance. There are 3 that you are going to run into, and they are very different fulcrums. The first fulcrum occurs in what we call the launch phase, 0 revenue to 10K a month. That's what we call the time fulcrum. If you do not solve the time fulcrum, you will never get and keep your business above 10K. If you don't get and keep your business above 10K, you will never develop any sort of financial freedom. You will always be in this vicious treadmill, and it is vicious. How do you know what this looks like? If I consider this your revenue line, what it looks like is get the work, do the work, no work, get the work, do the work, no work. And we get stuck in a vicious cycle of this treadmill of get the work, do the work, no work. And then what it feels like is when I'm getting the work, it doesn't feel like I have enough time to do that when I'm doing the demand side. And then when I have the work, it doesn't feel like I have enough time to do it, much less go get new work. And so this relationship with time has to be recalibrated, because there's not going to be enough time to scale the business easily, and you're going to feel like you're stuck and you're not moving forward consistently. Now, that blue box is where the problem is. The minute I say there's not enough time to do this, and the minute I feel like I'm stuck, and the minute I feel like my business is not moving forward, guess what? I don't move forward. And all I can see from that point forward is how hard it is. If there's anybody that has experienced or is experiencing this time fulcrum, kind of react to what I'm saying and give me your perspective. Am I hitting the nail on the head? Do you see it differently? Anybody want to share?
Exactly how I feel. Yes, exactly. Hitting it. I can relate.
And I was here too. And in 2003, when I finally, after 2 years, got my business, again, I've been doing entrepreneurship for a long time. When I finally got above 10K, I thought I was going to die. I mean, I hate to be melodramatic, but it was like, okay, I got this new project with Target. Oh, I'm over here delivering this new project with Target. Oh, I don't have any work. And it was like, oh, I got this new project with Burlington Northern. Oh gosh, I don't have any work. And all I could feel was the hardness of it until I took a step back and I'm like, okay, Terry, how do I make this easy? Well, how do you crack the time fulcrum is by saying, I'm going to dedicate a certain percent of my day and a certain percent of my week to demand, even when I have the supply. So part of how you get out of the time fulcrum, and I'm going to give you the 5 strategies, all of the 5 strategies in about 15 minutes, is you have to dedicate time to still working demand, even when you have the business. And I know part of you is thinking it's not possible, but it is. It really comes down to the way you prioritize and the way you focus. So that's the first fulcrum. The third thing that I learned, so remember, the first thing is I need to back up and make it simple. And in order to do that, I'm going to start with the basic element of business, which is balancing supply and demand. The second big insight was this time fulcrum idea. And this is one where you do not get and keep the business past 10K if you do not solve for this. And it's very frustrating. The second one, when I got above 10K a month, yay for me, is the time fulcrum wasn't enough anymore. Now I had a new fulcrum. So that's the second fulcrum. And I call it the resource fulcrum. In the resource fulcrum, we have a new problem. Time is a resource. Technology is a resource. Contractors, team members are a resource. But I don't always have enough demand to pay for those resources. And most businesses that get stood up actually quit here. Quit on the way to 10K. Most businesses quit here because it was so hard to get beyond 10K, at least it felt hard, that when they get to the resource fulcrum, and the resource fulcrum looks like this, loops. It literally feels like Groundhog Day. It's these constant setbacks. And it just feels like it's working. No, it's not. 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 And what challenges founders here is not just the time. There's not enough time. There aren't enough of the right people to help me. I need somebody to help me with my accounting. I need somebody to help me with the website. I need somebody to help me with social media. Where do I find those people? I need a VA. I need somebody to help me with my emails. I need somebody to set up the system. Where do I find those people? And there's this loop. And what happens in the loop is we try something, it doesn't work, and we feel like we failed, and we feel the setback. Setbacks are demoralizing in this phase. And again, most businesses that get stood up quit here because of that constant feeling of the setback. And so here, risk and profit doesn't occur in a straight line, but unfortunately, we think it should occur in a straight line. We want it to be from here to there. And these loops are infuriating to us because we feel like we're failing, but we're not failing. It's one of the reasons why we call this phase shape, because what you're really doing, if you really think about it, is you're really shaping and molding the business. This is when the business really becomes a business, is in this phase. In launch, you're still trying to figure out, how do I get the clients? How do I deliver the work? What are the templates I need? You know, what products am I really selling? What are they priced at? In shape, you're really, the stress is, how do I, scale this thing? How do I make it repeatable? How do I duplicate myself? And that's what really happens in this phase. And the part that's demoralizing is these iterations that we view as failures and mistakes. What they really are just iterations. They're the business kind of working out the kinks. They're pushing you to a higher level. They're adding pressure to your life in a very frustrating way. And we want it, as humans, we want to go from here to there, and we want it to be a straight line. But these dips that occur, we view them as hard, and we view them as failure, and it just eats at our spirit. And what I want to encourage you to do, both in the first fulcrum, is to stop looking at the hardness of it and stop feeling the hardness of it and look for the good in it. The beautiful thing about shape, and Shifco, by the way, is just about ready to come out of shape, just so you know, as a business. And man, it's been tough, and there's not enough hours in the day. And wow, we've got revenue, but I can't add that resource over here. it's tricky. And what happens is we tend to focus on the dips. We tend to focus on the failures rather than looking at them as opportunities for the business to really work out the kinks. And that's what's really happening in this phase. You and the business are really working out the kinks and making it more scalable. Does anybody want to comment on this? Or Lisa, are there any comments in the chat to share or challenge this thinking? Okay, third fulcrum. So the next thing that I learned is, oh, great. When you get your business through shape, and by the way, our goal for every member is to get them into and through shape, even when they start at zero, because this is where you can build a business and be financially free here. It's really, really hard to do that when the business is under 10K, but you can become financially free here. And again, I'm going to give you the strategies in a minute, but there's one more fulcrum to address, and that one is the leadership fulcrum. And the leadership fulcrum happens above 30K, and it takes you all the way to 1 million, sometimes 2 million. And in the leadership fulcrum, it looks more like the revenue looks more like this. I call it steps and stalls. I've got another one in my business. It's probably it's my second favorite business. Shiftco's number one, but Ignite on Purpose is my second favorite one, and it's in the leadership fulcrum. And this phase feels like step, then stall, repeat, step, then stall, repeat. And it'll feel like climbing stairs. And again, progress, really, these stalls can kind of demoralize us. I'm not going to spend too much time here because it sounds like most of you are in the first two fulcrums. But if you are here, you're not alone. Any business that gets above 30K has to make it through the leadership fulcrum. It's kind of a rite of passage. And most of what we're thinking about in terms of scalability, you're going to have to work through that here, but you're also going to have to work through having the right people in the right seats. So the leadership fulcrum is step, then stall. So that was the big insight. Let me put them in the context of Shipco is based on something I built called the Conscious Business Growth Platform. It's 7 different business phases from 0 to 10 million. And let me show you where these fulcrums are. So the time fulcrum shows up when you're in the launch phase. Typically, you'll start to see it 3, 4, 5K a month, where it will feel like there's not enough time. Then you hit the resource fulcrum, which quite honestly is harder than the time fulcrum. And the resource fulcrum, time is a resource, talent and people on your team, systems, processes, those are all resources, cash. That shows up in the 10 to 30. And then you hit the leadership fulcrum above 30K all the way to 1 to 2 million. So that's how you can kind of see the fulcrums pan out. So what do we do about this, Terry? That's great. Thank you for clarifying that. But what do we do? Well, the first thing is you have to figure out what needs to change. So this comes back to, a couple of you mentioned this when I was asking for examples. We have a tendency to get into a solution. Let me try that. Let me try that. Let me try that. Let me try that. And we don't take enough time to really define the problem. What is it that actually needs to change? So if you're feeling any of these fulcrums, my challenge to you is, rather than thinking about the solutions, I want you to take a step back. And I want you to think about that fulcrum. What needs to change on the demand side and what needs to change on the supply side? And you're going to have to change something on both sides. If you think of a rock that you're climbing, you don't just jump up on the rock. What happens is you stick your hand up into a little crevice, and then you lift your opposite leg up, and then you reach your hand to the other crevice, and then you lift the other leg up. I mean, just literally think about the rock climber. You're going to have to address both sides of the business. Something on demand is going to need to change, and something on supply is going to change in both cases. And sometimes it's just focus, and sometimes it's systems. We'll get into the what do you change options here in a minute. But you rather than jumping and let me hire a VA, let me put a CRM in, let me, do this thing over here. Rather than jump into the solutions, I really want to caution you to take a step back and say, Terry's right, and she's been doing this entrepreneurship thing for a long time. I need to figure out what needs to change, and I need to be more specific and more focused on it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is in your relationship with easy, which is where I started today, you've got to understand what I call the net profit of time. And you've got to begin to look at time as money, and how can I use time as money to create more net profit? I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And then lastly is there's 5 different ways that you can get there. So 5 different paths. And depending on which fulcrum you're in, you're going to take different paths to get there. Why that's important is frequently when people come to Shiftco, they think we're going to prescribe the way to do it. People think we have the magic pill and we're going to give you the quick fix. And they're always surprised to learn we don't believe that. We don't believe there is a quick fix. We don't believe there's one way to get there. What we believe is that there's different ways to get there. What we're going to show you how to do is the different ways, and we're going to help you figure out which way is going to work for you. And that's what I'm going to do in that third part. So let's start first with figuring out what needs to change. The fastest way to do that is using what's known as an energy impact chart. I do this every year, usually November, December, which is when my life gets really busy as an investor. November, December, January, February, because I've got board meetings and shareholder reports and all this kind of stuff coming on, and I get really busy. So before I go into that busy season, I always do one of these energy impact charts. I literally have a half-day planning session on my calendar once a year to do this. And I build this out. And what you do is you say, okay, what do I love to do? That's fulfilling. What's draining me? How much impact is it going to be? And I literally plot everything that I'm working. I pull up my calendar and I'm like, well, why was I doing that? I don't really enjoy that. Or that doesn't really, why am I focused on that? That doesn't move the business forward. And so you plot all of the different things that you're working on into this energy impact chart. And ultimately, what you want to do is you want to have more of your time here. And then anything that's here, so it drains you and it really doesn't move the needle, you really should think about whether or not you should even be doing that. So that's the first thing. Anything that's over here, I'm going to look for a system, or I'm going to outsource this. So anything that's in this chart, that's what you want to give your VA if you're going to hire a VA, or you want to look for a system to do that. And then over here, it's really fulfilling, but it's a low impact. An example of that for me, quite honestly, is social media. I'm one of those weird people that I love social media. I love posting on social media. I love interacting with social media. There's all sorts of reasons why I love it. Doesn't matter why, but I love it. But it doesn't really drive revenue. It does other things for me, but it doesn't really drive revenue. Well, if I look at how much time I spend on social media, I could convince myself that all of this is great because it's going to help me with revenue, but it really doesn't. So this is kind of what I call the honesty box, is being honest with yourself that you might really like it. And most people don't like social media. I'm just one of those weird people. But you've got things here that you really enjoy doing, but they're really not moving the business forward. You want to really hold yourself accountable for that box. Most of the times when I'm working with a founder that's in a fulcrum, when they plot this out, there's a lot of things in that upper left-hand box that they're working on. I've got a podcast. I got my own podcast. I love it. I'm like, how much business did you get from the podcast? Not much. How much time do you spend on it? 5 hours a week. But I love it, Terry. Okay, great. It's 5 hours a week, but it's not really adding impact. So we got to change it so that it gets more impact, or we got to really rethink how we're doing it. So this is a great way to figure out where do you start rather than jump into a solution. As you plot out what you're working on and how much you enjoy it. So the things that you enjoy are at the top, and the things that are draining you are at the bottom. Let me come back to this and put my annotation. So I love it up here. It's happy. I hate it down here in either these two boxes. And then you really look at whether or not it's really driving impact in your business, and it allows you to really rethink things. Now, in a minute, we're going to talk about what do you do with the things in particular that are down here. Anything that's down here, these 5 ways are ways that we can fix. Anything that's up here, you've got to rethink in some ways. And then down here, you really, really have to question those. Maybe it's not as important as you think it is. I'll give you an example of that. Businesses that are in launch get all, kind of hung up. I need an LLC and I need a business plan and I need this and I need that. And I'm like, no, you don't. You just think you do because the world's told you need those things. You really don't need those things. So that box right there, also, there's a bit of honesty with that, that you can question. And for those of you that are ShiftCo members, when you build this grid, feel free to meet with me. And if you're not a ShiftCo member, build this grid and I'll meet with you and talk it through. Before we get to the net profit of time, I want to see if there's any questions that anybody has about this before we go into how do you rethink time and really see it as a vehicle of profit.
One question posted, Terry. How do we do more in the top right? I know what has got me impact and I feel fulfilled, but don't know how to get more of that. For example, keynote talks.
Yes. Was that a ShiftCo member or?
Yeah, that's me, Bobby, Terry. Yeah, thanks.
Bobby, great question. You basically change your entire demand generation strategy away from getting clients to getting speaking engagements. The challenge that people like you have, that you have these incredible services and you really love to speak, and speaking also drives your services, is you try to do demand gen for the clients. And then when you have time left over, you do it for speaking. If you'll just pivot your demand generation focus to getting speaking, and then you let the speaking drive your services, it will clean that right up really quick.
Thanks.
Other questions? Okay, so let's move to the next thing. This was Neely, go ahead.
In the example that you just responded to with Bobby, so if the demand generation is towards these speaking engagements, what happens if those speaking engagements are like one-offs? So you're at a conference, that conference is not going to hire you again the following year, and there's no additional work that they hire you for, but you're just sort of like spinning your wheels, getting these one-offs. How do you pivot that?
Is your whole business, let me just get these off the screen here. Is your whole business speaking, or do you have other things that you sell?
I have other, I have workshops and one-on-one, but my whole demand generation is around finding speaking opportunities.
Yeah.
Perfect. So then what we're going to do is we're going to build what's called an organic sales strategy for you on how do I convert those speaking engagements. Organic means that it comes to me rather than me going after it. We're going to build an organic strategy to turn those speaking engagements into workshops and those other things that you said. And that's something I can show you how to do.
Okay,
and so
great.
You keep your focus on getting the speaking engagement. It's going to be a one-off. They might not hire you for another couple of years, but there's a strategy by which the way you approach the original engagement, what you do when you're on stage and what you do after, that turns it into ongoing engagements.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions that came up before we go to net profit of time? Okay, so this was another big insight, and then I'll wrap up with a couple of other tools for you. The net profit of time was, I think, one of the biggest breakthroughs for me in terms of my relationship with ease. And it's the only way I can describe it is I developed a new relationship with the concept of ease. And what I did is I calculated how much money I wanted to make, not how much money I was making. And I divided it by 2,000, because there's 2,000 working hours for most entrepreneurs in a year. And I said, okay, I want to make $400,000 a year. Let me divide that by 2,000. That's how much 1 hour of my time is worth. So that's step number one. And then, and I use $100 bills. And so I break it down into 30 minutes. So if I want to make $400,000 every hour is at least worth $200, okay, at least. And so I have these little fake $100 bills, and that's 30 minutes of time. And I keep this on my desk. And I think about every 30-minute block. And I'm like, is that a good use of time? And when should I outsource that? And so what happens is, because I think of time in terms of money, I am very, very good at, when I go to outsource something, knowing right away what my ROI is. And so the net profit of time is, if 1 hour is worth $200, if I know what I want my annual income to be, and I'm thinking in terms of these $100 bills, and am I investing these $100 bills, or am I just burning them? Then when I go to say, hey, Bev, who's one of the team members I outsource things to, I want you to pick up this project. I know that Bev's bill rate is $25 an hour. Mine, if I were using it, I think in terms of this, $200, if I get Bev to do this, how much money did I make? 200 minus 25. I just made 175. If I can get Bev to be productive at $25 an hour, and in my mind, my time is worth $200 an hour. If I can get her productive, which is the if part, so I have the right person and they can get productive, I actually made $175. And so the net profit of time is doing that calculation, is saying, what do I want? How much money do I want to be making? What is then divided by 2,000 hours? That is basically going to be what 1 hour of your time is worth. And now I'm comparing accounting, a VA, social media. I make the list of things you have to outsource. What's your hourly rate, person? I'm adding a fractional CFO here pretty soon. I've found his hourly rate. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. This is a negative net profit for me. I'm not going to, that cost is too high for me right now. So it allows you to balance out what you outsource and when you outsource it, based on how much net profit you're going to get if you get the time back. Now, in a minute, I'm going to talk about what you do when you get the time back, but you first of all have to put numbers to it. Anybody have questions on this?
One quick question. Obviously, any new person you bring on, you have to figure out if they're going to be productive, as you said. How do you factor in that startup cost in your calculation?
Just exactly the way that the way that you would think, which is, it's wonderful that this person can do this. I think it's wonderful, but I don't really know if they're going to be productive. So I'm going to build in a buffer that even though their rate is $25 an hour, their effectiveness is going to be like 2 to 1. It's going to take them 2 hours, of billing for that 1 hour. Of what I could do in an hour, it's going to take them 2 or 3 times. I calculate that and say, okay, Bev, instead of you costing me 25, you're going to actually cost me 75. Is that still a good ROI? And then what I'm going to really be working on is helping Bev get more effective. So it's like a 3 to 1, so that she doesn't have that wasted time and I get the productivity that I want. And it's just literally putting a calculator or a spreadsheet to it. So when I have a new resource, it's 3x. It's going to take them 3 times as long to do this as it does me. Do I still get a good ROI on that? And then after I get that ROI, how can I make them more effective and more efficient so that their cost comes down? Does that make sense, Joe?
Yep, definitely. Thanks.
Okay, and then this other part is, you have to also learn how to invest time. And that's why I keep these fake $100 bills near me. And they literally sit here. And when I'm having a meeting, I'm like, okay, how much time did that take? Is that a good investment of time? And you go back to this energy impact chart, and you can really start to break it down, and you can say, all right, I want to do more things that are in the upper right and the upper left with an asterisk. I want to drop anything that's a low impact. And then the delegate box are the things that I want to outsource, but I want to do it with that net profit of time mindset. Okay, Bev, I'm going to give you these tasks. What's your hourly rate? Okay, how many hours do we think it's going to take? Multiply that times 2 or 3. Is there still a good net profit of time? Meaning it's going to cost me less if you do it, as long as I use my time wisely, and I'll come back to that in a minute. That's a good task to delegate. And by simply putting a simple spreadsheet, I'm not a financial person, I'm a former English teacher, but I can pull up a little Excel spreadsheet and calculate this. You can figure out where it makes sense to delegate first. You're going to start with the things that give you the highest net profit. And sometimes accounting, although it's the easiest to outsource and usually people want to get it off their plate, sometimes it's not the highest net profit of time. Sometimes it's managing your calendar, or sometimes it's doing social media, or, you know, every business is different, but you want to outsource those things that give you the best return the quickest. Questions on that before we talk about what do you do with the time that you get back? So we outsourced something, we've got time back. Now, what are we going to do? I had 5 hours freed up in my week. Thank you, Bev, for taking that off my plate. Well, here's the key. You only get that return if you invest the time you got back wisely. And I call this the athlete's advantage. There's a lot of research that backs this up. College and professional athletes are 3 times more successful as entrepreneurs than non-athletes. Great piece of research. And I was curious about that, like, why is that? And I now call it the athlete's advantage. What it is athletes know how to make moves versus be in motion. Motion is the act of just doing stuff. Woo, I'm doing that, I'm doing that, I'm doing, you bounce around and you do stuff and you do stuff. When you're making moves, which is what athletes are really good at, you're going from one place to another. Everything has an objective. And Joe, you hit the nail on the head with the example that you gave. That focus activity, you start your day, you figure out what that one priority is that has to get done, what's going to be the biggest advantage. That's a move. Other things end up being emotion. They make me feel better. They make me think I'm doing stuff, but I'm not actually moving my business forward. And so you got to kind of be honest with yourself. Are you in motion, doing stuff? Or are you making moves? And so what I've trained myself to do is to make moves. Moves are effort with intention. So I'm not just doing stuff. I know what the intention behind the effort is. I know how to get a good ROI on that time. Moves are also measurable. An example of that is when I go into a networking event, I say, I want to meet 5 people and I want to develop 2 relationships. I don't want to meet 50 people because that's a lot of motion, you know, make me feel good. I got all these cards, but I'm not really meeting the right people. But I focus on, I'm going to meet 5 people, but I'm really going to develop 2 relationships. If I walk out of there with 5 cards, but 2 of them are a good relationship, that's a good ROI of time. So that's an example of effort with intention. And so you can develop what I call daily do's. It's similar very much to what Joe described of what are the moves that are really going to move your business forward. And then you dedicate time to making those moves. And I'm always asking myself, will this action move me to my goal? And this is how I get a huge ROI of my time. Is I know what I'm going to outsource next. I always know it. I've got a list of 3 things right now. What's going to get outsourced? And then after that, what's going to get outsourced after that? And so this is going to get outsourced. I'm going to get some time back and I'm over here and I'm going to make moves with that time so that I get the payback. And that's how you get an incredible ROI of time. The last thing I want to cover, and then I'll stop the recording and see if there's any questions, is the Business Simple is about managing 5 components of your business delivery, the delivery side of your business. First is your product offering. Sometimes we end up having services or products that don't sell. back to Izzy, this is a product, this is one of the investments I talked about, and they have some SKUs that don't sell. And so I said, well, why don't we just stop promoting them? If they sell, they sell. And if they don't, we'll eventually get rid of them. And the CEO of that business was like, that's a great idea. Like, let's do that. So we took the top selling SKUs, top 3 selling SKUs. We focused there. Everything else, we
Покажи.
said, if they buy them, great. If they don't, they don't.
Да,
And then
там трындец.
there's
А я такая вся деловая.
1 second, there's some sounds going. Let me just mute her. Okay, sorry about that. And you can do the exact same thing with services. And so I did the exact same thing in my business. I've got this one business and it was feeling hard again. And I looked at the service offering and said, why am I doing these things over here? Well, I needed it to make money. I don't really need it to make money right now. And I stopped doing them. So you can retool your service offering. You can stop doing things. It's one of the low-hanging fruit of your business is to actually rethink what you're doing and either narrow it down or drop some things altogether. Second is people and resources. It's one of the things most people think of is what can I outsource? So that's obvious. The third one, though, is where with conscious businesses, I almost always find the opportunity, and that is pricing and profits. Is most people are underpriced because their business is a mission to them, and they really need to rethink the business model to make it more profitable. Number 4 is people overlook this all the time is tools and process versus people. We always think, let me hire a person to do that. Well, sometimes you can put a tool in place. And then my 5th one of these 5 Ps is probably, I think, one of the smartest things that you can do. And for those of you that are SHIPCO members in the core, there's a whole lesson on effective partnerships. But what I figured out how to do is how to build the right type of partnerships to get rid of some of the services. So an example of one of my businesses, Ignite on Purpose, does demand generation, and we need websites. And so we found ourselves building websites all the time, and it was not very profitable and not very fun. And so I developed a partnership for websites, and now I have 3 partners that I refer that work to. They give me a little piece of the profit. I don't have to worry about the website. So partnership models are one of, especially if you're in shape, partnership models are one of the best ways that you can make your business more efficient and get some of that time back. And then when you get the time back, obviously you want to put that time back into demand gen. So wrapping up, hopefully you've enjoyed today. I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions. Feel free to join us for any of these events. They're always free. They're always open because we really do want to help conscious businesses grow. I'm going to stop the recording and see if anybody has any remaining questions.